The apartment above mine had been empty for 6 months, but every night at exactly 1:30, I heard someone slowly drag a chair across the floor above my bedroom. I finally complained to the landlord, and the next morning he unlocked the unit so I could see for myself. There was nothing inside. No furniture, no tenants, not even a chair. Then the landlord looked at me and said, "You said the sound was coming from above your bedroom." I nodded. His face changed. "There's no apartment above your bedroom." I moved into the building because the rent was cheap and because I was tired of roommates. I was 25, working a remote customer support job for a software company, and I had spent the previous 2 years sharing apartments with people who never washed dishes, never replaced toilet paper, and somehow always had friends over when I needed to sleep. So when I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Pittsburgh for almost $300 less than everything else in the area, I applied the same day. The building was old, 5 stories of dark red brick wedged between a laundromat and an empty storefront on a quiet side street. It had narrow hallways, a small elevator that shook between floors, radiators that clanked whenever the heat came on, and that permanent old building smell of dust, cooking oil, and damp plaster. None of that bothered me. The apartment itself was clean enough. Unit 4C, 4th floor, middle of the hallway, facing the alley. The bedroom was small. The kitchen was outdated, but the windows were big, and the rent included heat. For me, that was enough. The landlord was a man named Raymond, probably in his early 60s, who wore the same navy work jacket every time I saw him. He lived somewhere outside the city, but stopped by most mornings to deal with repairs. On move-in day, while he was showing me the fuse box and radiator valves, I asked if the building was usually quiet. He said the walls were thick, but the floors carried sound. Then he pointed toward my ceiling and added, "Nobody above you right now, so you got lucky." I asked if 5C was being renovated. He paused before answering and said there had been a plumbing issue the previous winter. A pipe burst, ruined part of the floor, and the tenant moved out. Insurance arguments followed, then contractor delays, and the apartment had stayed empty ever since. He said they planned to fix it eventually, but for now, it was locked and used for nothing. At the time, I barely registered the information. An empty apartment above me sounded like a good thing. The first 2 weeks were normal. I unpacked, learned which radiator hissed loudest, figured out that the elevator sometimes stopped a few inches below the hallway floor, and got used to hearing neighbors through the building in ways that didn't make sense geographically. Someone's television sounded like it came through my kitchen wall. A baby crying 2 floors down sometimes seemed to come from the closet. Pipes carried conversations. Old buildings do that. Sound travels through them strangely, and after a while your brain stops trying to place everything. The first noise from 5C came on a Tuesday night. I was in bed watching something on my laptop when I heard a chair scrape across the floor above me. It was a very specific sound. Wooden legs dragging over hardwood. Long, slow, heavy. It moved maybe 4 feet, stopped, then dragged again. I looked at the ceiling and remembered the apartment was supposed to be empty. My first thought was Raymond or a contractor had gone up there during the day and left something unstable. Maybe a window was open and the wind was moving furniture. Then I remembered Raymond had said there wasn't any furniture in the unit. I checked the time. 1:31 a.m. The sound stopped a few minutes later and I went to sleep. The next night, almost exactly the same thing happened. At 1:30, a chair dragged across the floor above my bedroom. This time it moved farther, from somewhere near the center of the room toward the wall, then back again. After that came footsteps. 3 or 4 slow steps. Pause. 3 or 4 more. They were too heavy to be mice, and too deliberate to be pipes. Someone was walking around above me. I texted Raymond the next morning. I tried to make it sound casual. I told him I thought someone might be getting into 5C at night. He replied almost immediately and asked why. I said I could hear footsteps and furniture moving. There was a long gap before his response. Then he wrote, "Nobody has access except me. I'll check." Around 10, he knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to come upstairs with him. I said yes. We took the stairs to the 5th floor. Unit 5C was directly above mine. Same position in the hallway, same layout. The door had 2 locks, a normal deadbolt and a heavy silver padlock fixed through a metal latch screwed into the frame. Raymond took out a ring of keys, unlocked both, and pushed the door open. The apartment was empty, completely empty. No chair, no table, no boxes, no tools, nothing. The hardwood floor was dusty and stained from old water damage, especially near the kitchen. Part of the ceiling had been opened near the bathroom, and plastic sheeting covered one wall. The place smelled dry and stale, like a room that had been closed too long. Raymond walked through every room while I followed. The bedroom above mine was bare. I stood near the center and looked down at the floor, trying to match it to the exact spot where my bed was below. There was nothing there. No marks, no loose boards, no furniture that could have scraped. Raymond checked the windows, all locked. He checked a small maintenance hatch under the kitchen sink, closed. He even opened the closets, empty. Then he looked at me and said, "Old building, you're probably hearing somebody else." I knew how that sounded, and standing in the empty apartment in daylight, I almost believed him. I apologized for bothering him. Before we left, though, I noticed something in the dust near the bedroom wall. A line. Not exactly a footprint, more like a narrow arc, the kind a chair leg might leave if something heavy had been dragged repeatedly across the same section of floor. I pointed it out. Raymond stared at it for a second too long, then rubbed it away with his boot and said it was probably left by the contractors. That night, the scraping started at 1:30 again. This time I recorded it. I put my phone on the nightstand and let the microphone run. The sound was clearer on the recording than it had been in the room. A chair dragging slowly, then 4 footsteps, then silence. I sent it to Raymond the next morning. He didn't answer until afternoon. When he did, all he wrote was, "I'll change the lock." He changed it that day. I watched him from the hallway. New deadbolt, new padlock. He even put a small strip of blue painter's tape across the door and frame so we would know if someone opened it. I went upstairs before bed and checked. The tape was intact. At 1:30, the chair dragged across the floor. I sat upright in bed immediately. This time, the sound started directly above me and moved toward the window. Then footsteps followed it. Slow, barefoot-sounding steps crossing the room. I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The footsteps above moved into the kitchen too. I stopped. They stopped. I took 2 steps toward the living room. 2 steps sounded overhead. I took 1 backward, 1 overhead. I froze. Then, without moving, I waited. Nothing happened for maybe 10 seconds. Then the footsteps above took 3 steps on their own, toward where I was standing. I left the apartment and spent the rest of the night at a 24-hour diner. The next morning, the blue tape across 5C was still untouched. That was when I stopped telling myself it was sound traveling through the pipes. I started paying attention to the pattern. Every night, the noises began between 1:29 and 1:31. The chair always moved first, then the footsteps. Sometimes they stayed in the bedroom. Sometimes they crossed into the kitchen. One night I heard what sounded like cabinet doors opening and closing. Another night, something rolled slowly across the floor above the living room, stopped, then rolled back. It sounded like a glass bottle. I started sleeping with headphones on, but that made it worse because I would take them off and wonder whether I had missed something. About a week later, something new happened. At 1:34, while I was sitting on the couch trying to ignore the footsteps, my phone buzzed. An AirDrop notification appeared on the screen. 5C would like to share a photo. I stared at it. My phone was set to receive from contacts only, so I had no idea how the request had reached me. I should have declined it. Instead, I accepted. The photo loaded. It was my bedroom. Taken from above. Not from the doorway. Not from the window. Directly from the ceiling. Looking straight down at my bed. I was visible in the image, lying under the blanket with my laptop beside me. The timestamp in the photo metadata was from the previous night at 1:32 a.m. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then I went into the bedroom and looked up at the ceiling. Smooth plaster. No vent directly above the bed. No smoke detector. No camera. Nothing. I called Raymond immediately. He answered sounding half asleep. I sent him the image. He said nothing for almost a full minute. Then he asked, "Did you go upstairs?" I told him no. He asked if I had ever copied the key to 5C. I nearly shouted at him. He apologized and said he would come in the morning. He arrived before 8 with another man from the property company. Together, they opened 5C. The blue tape was still intact before Raymond cut it. Inside, the apartment looked exactly as it had before. Empty, dusty, locked windows, nothing. We went into the bedroom. I showed them where my bed would be below. The second man, whose name I never caught, crouched and inspected the floor. Then he pulled out a flashlight. There was a tiny hole between two floorboards, smaller than a pencil. He shined the light through it and said he could see darkness below. Raymond looked uncomfortable. The man said it was probably an old nail hole or cable pass-through from renovations. I asked whether someone could have taken the photograph through it. He said not with any normal phone or camera. They sealed the hole with wood filler before leaving. That night, at 1:30, the chair did not move. For the first time in weeks, 5C was quiet. I lay awake anyway. At 2:04, something tapped on my bedroom ceiling. 3 times, directly above my head. The next day, I began looking into the apartment's history, not because I believed I would find anything useful, but because I had reached the point where knowing nothing felt worse than finding something bad. Public records told me the building was built in the 1920s. It had changed owners several times. There had been fires, plumbing problems, code violations, normal old building stuff. I searched the apartment address with 5C, then tenant names if I could find them. Eventually, I found an old local forum post from almost 10 years earlier. Someone had written about living in the same building. The post was mostly complaints about heat and management, but one sentence caught my attention. The guy below 5C kept saying somebody walked around upstairs after the tenant moved out. I tried messaging the account. No response. Then I searched archived rental listings. One showed Unit 5C, furnished several years earlier. The layout matched exactly. Hardwood floors, same bedroom, same kitchen. In one photograph, there was a wooden chair sitting in the bedroom, right in the middle of the floor. The chair looked old, plain, straight-backed. Nothing unusual about it except its location. It wasn't beside a desk or table. It faced the wall. I sent the listing to Raymond and asked if the chair had belonged to the previous tenant. He didn't respond. That night, The scraping returned, but it was louder. The chair dragged from one side of the bedroom to the other, stopped, then moved again. The footsteps followed. I went into the living room. The footsteps followed above me. I went into the kitchen. They followed. I walked back to the bedroom. They followed. Then my phone buzzed. Another AirDrop request. 5C would like to share a photo. I declined it. The request appeared again. I declined again. Again. On the fourth request, the preview thumbnail loaded before I touched anything. It showed me standing in my bedroom, holding my phone. The photo was being taken right then. I looked up. A dark circle had appeared in the ceiling above me. Not a hole exactly, more like a wet spot, perfectly round, about the size of a quarter. A drop of water fell from it and hit the floor, then another. I stepped backward. The wet spot widened. Water began dripping steadily. The apartment above had no active plumbing, according to Raymond. The water had been shut off months earlier. I called him again and told him he needed to come immediately or I was calling the fire department. He arrived 40 minutes later, angry and scared in equal measure. The leak had become a thin stream by then. We went upstairs together. The tape was intact. The locks were intact. When Raymond opened 5C, we both heard something move inside. A chair scraping across wood. From the bedroom. Raymond stopped in the doorway. I whispered, "You heard that?" He nodded. For the first time, he didn't offer an explanation. We walked toward the bedroom. The apartment was still empty, but the dust on the floor had changed. There were footprints, bare footprints. They began near the bedroom wall, crossed to the center of the room, turned, and went back, then repeated. Dozens of overlapping tracks forming a path through the dust. Some were clear, others faded beneath newer prints. They looked as if someone had been pacing the same route for months. And in the center of the room was a chair, the same chair from the old rental photograph. Wooden, straight-backed, facing the floor. Raymond whispered, "That wasn't here." I didn't answer. The chair sat directly above my bed. Beneath it, between the floorboards, was a hole. Not the tiny hole they had sealed. This one was wider, roughly the size of a quarter. Water pooled around it even though there was no pipe nearby. Raymond moved the chair aside. The scraping sound made my entire body tense. It was exactly what I had been hearing every night. He crouched beside the hole and shined his phone flashlight into it. His face changed. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer. I knelt beside him. There should have been the ceiling cavity, insulation, maybe plaster, and then my bedroom below. Instead, through the hole, I could see another room. A room with hardwood floors, old wallpaper, a wooden chair. It looked like 5C, but we were already inside 5C. The room below us was identical. Same water stain near the wall, same closet door, same cracked baseboard, and someone was sitting in the chair. A man. We could only see the top of his head and shoulders from above. He sat perfectly still, facing away from us. Raymond pulled back so fast he fell onto one hand. I kept looking. I don't know why. The man below slowly raised his head, not toward the ceiling, toward something in front of him. Then, in the impossible room beneath us, footsteps sounded. Something walked across the floor toward the chair. The seated man began to shake. A phone appeared in his hand. The screen lit up. From my pocket, my own phone buzzed. AirDrop request. 5C would like to share a photo. I looked at Raymond. He said, "Don't." I accepted. The image showed Raymond and me kneeling on the floor of 5C, looking through the hole, taken from above us. We both looked up. The ceiling was bare. Then the apartment door slammed shut. Raymond ran first. We both did. He grabbed the handle. It wouldn't turn. The lock was on our side, but the door felt held shut from the hallway. Behind us, the chair moved. Not much, just one slow scrape. We turned. It had moved back to the center of the bedroom. No one had touched it. Then the footsteps began in the apartment with us, bare feet moving across the dusty floor. But there was nobody there. One footprint appeared near the bedroom wall, then another. Fresh marks pressed into the dust one by one, coming toward us. Raymond kicked the door near the lock. Once. Twice. On the third hit, it flew open so suddenly we almost fell into the hallway. We ran downstairs. I never went back into my apartment that night. Raymond paid for a hotel room without me asking. The next morning, he told me I could break the lease without penalty. He also told me they were closing 5C permanently. I asked him what he knew. At first, he denied knowing anything. Then I showed him the old forum post and the rental photo. He sat quietly for a long time. Finally, he told me the previous tenant of 5C had been a man named Howard Pike. He lived alone and rarely spoke to anyone. About 6 months before I moved in, neighbors complained about noise at night, furniture dragging, footsteps. Howard insisted the sounds came from the apartment above him. There was no apartment above 5C, only the roof. According to Raymond, Howard became obsessed with the ceiling. He claimed someone lived in a room above his bedroom. Management found small holes drilled through the plaster. Cameras pointed upward, hundreds of photographs on his phone showing only darkness. Then one morning, Howard disappeared. His door was locked from the inside. His wallet, keys, phone, and shoes were still there. The bedroom chair was in the middle of the room, and there was a hole in the floor beneath it. Raymond said they assumed Howard had damaged the unit and left through some maintenance access, even though they never figured out how. The plumbing leak happened a few weeks later, giving them an excuse to empty and close the apartment. I asked what happened to the chair. Raymond said they threw it away. I asked if he was sure. He said yes. That was the last conversation we ever had. I moved into another apartment across town 3 days later. New building, concrete floors, no unit directly above mine, just a mechanical level. I deleted every photo from 5C. I disabled AirDrop permanently. For a while, I thought distance had fixed it. 3 months later, Raymond called me. I almost didn't answer. His voice sounded exhausted. He said contractors had removed the entire floor in 5C. Not repaired it, removed it. They stripped the bedroom down to the beams, expecting to find damaged plumbing, hidden cavities, anything that could explain the hole. There was nothing below the floor except the normal ceiling structure of 4C. No second room, no hidden space, no chair. I asked why he was calling. He said a new tenant had moved into 4C after I left. I remember feeling angry that he rented it again. Then he told me the tenant had complained about footsteps from above. Every night around 1:30. I asked if 5C was still empty. Raymond said yes. Then he said something else. The new guy says someone keeps whispering his name through the ceiling. I didn't know what to say. Raymond asked if anything had happened where I lived now. I told him no. That was a lie. 2 nights earlier, I had woken up at 1:30 to the sound of something dragging across the mechanical floor above my bedroom. One slow scrape, then another. I didn't tell Raymond because saying it aloud would have made it real. We ended the call. That night, I moved my bed into the living room. At 1:30, the apartment stayed quiet. At 1:31, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. AirDrop request. The sender was not 5C this time. It was 6C. My new building does not have a 6th floor. I stared at the request until the screen dimmed. Then the preview image loaded by itself. It showed a room I had never seen before. Bare hardwood floor, old wallpaper, a wooden chair in the center. Someone was sitting in it, a man facing away from the camera. At first, I thought it was Howard. Then I noticed the shirt. Mine. The shape of the shoulders. Mine. The back of the head. Mine. Beneath the image was a timestamp. Tomorrow, 1:30 a.m. I moved out the next morning. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I only rent top-floor apartments. I check building plans before signing anything. I never sleep beneath another unit. It helps sometimes, but not always, because about once every few months, usually when I've convinced myself it finally stopped, I wake up at exactly 1:30 in the morning, and somewhere above me, even when there is nothing above me but roof and sky, I hear a chair slowly drag across a wooden floor.